Live tonight from the virtual Charlotte Motor Speedway, we say good evening, sim racing fans, and welcome to a very special night of sim racing action here on STN Racing as we present to you special coverage of tonight's George Floyd 100. And we're happy that you're with us this evening alongside Josh Burtz. My name is Evan Pasoko, and Josh, we have a very good race in store for us this evening.
I have to agree with you. These Cup cars at this track, we know from the NASCAR Cup Series, produces a great show. And the consolation qualifying, I heard, as I wasn't in the session, but I heard there was a dive bomb pass on the last lap in the chicane for the transfer spot. So if that's any indication, really, we should see some amazing racing tonight.
We were talking earlier about this car track combo, and it is going to be a very exciting night of action on the track. And yes, we're happy that you're joining us on the broadcast here this evening, but kind of at the same time as well, disappointed that we even have to be here tonight because, of course, time and time again, we see the unnecessary use of force against people of color in this country, and a lot of the times at the hand of law enforcement, and it leads to the loss of life. And the death of George Floyd last week in Minneapolis is what has sparked protests not only here in the United States, but around the world. And that's why we're here tonight at the virtual Charlotte Motor Speedway. We're going to talk more about George's story, as well as how you can join us in our efforts tonight to make a difference against racism. And of course, that is something that extends far beyond just law enforcement. And there's far more qualified voices to talk about that than us here this evening. It is our job to entertain you this evening, and to bring us an exciting night of action. And I think that, it is going to be a who's who, by the way, in the field, Josh, of drivers in this race. It's going to be one of the best sim races you've seen in some time.
I mean, I only know a few of these names. There's Brian Mercurio, Zach Novak. I know he's one of the good Coca-Cola guys. I think defending champion, if I'm not mistaken. Could be wrong there. Let me look. Jake Poulin. I know Chris Overland. So Michael Frisch, actually. So a couple of these guys I know, but a lot of these guys I don't. But from the guys I do know, it's going to be a good race.
And, there's so many drivers trying to compete in this. The fact that the field of 41 cars that you're going to be seeing on track here as they are in a 15-minute open qualifying session. About 2 minutes left before we actually head down trackside for the grid in this one. Far more than just that number of cars wanted to qualify. So we split everybody up into 3 qualifier sessions. The top 13 times in each qualified through. And then we just wrapped up with the last chance qualifier race with the top 2 finishers made the main event. That was Chris Overland and Trey Shuttlesworth. So 41 drivers total going to make the start in this 100-mile, 44-lap race here from Charlotte. And of course, it is, you mentioned, drivers from the Coke Series. You got Road to Pro drivers, some of the biggest streaming names in the service. And I've seen many of charity events, if you will, over my years on the iRacing service. The iRacing community always does such a good job coming together for charitable organizations and, kind of annual events like that, charity streams to raise money. But I think tonight really a first of a social justice kind of an event. And, of course, none of this would have been possible without the work that Raja Karuth and as well, some of the other people behind the scenes, Monad Rahman as well, who kind of put it all the time just to get us on track here this evening. So a big thanks to all of those who made this possible. And of course, it wouldn't have been possible without the drivers who competed. Their entry fee, of course, going to support good causes this night, those entry fees divided amongst the Floyd Memorial Fund and the NAACP Legal Defense Fund. So everybody involved, me and you, Josh, we've got the easy job because we just get to come up here and talk about racing, but definitely hats off to everybody who made this happen.
Absolutely, Evan. If we want to go through while qualifying is about to end, I want to take a look at some of the qualifying order. Brian Mercurio sitting on pole position, a 1 minute 19.121. What's interesting, if I look down this order, I think there's about 10 cars within half a second, which is pretty competitive. But there's a lot of different spread in the competition in this field.
And we were, of course, I mentioned talking about the car track combo. It's a track that I love in these cup cars, but, my split would be about 6 or 7 seconds total off of everybody else. So it is really going to be a competitive race. We'll talk more about this format as this race goes on. There's going to be a competition caution at the halfway point and more. There is now 1 minute and 30 seconds left on the clock as time expires for drivers to be able to complete their active lap. So let's talk about that format. 44-lap race, 100 miles, but a cop yellow at lap 20. You might think, okay, that's kind of a lined up opportunity to get your pit service, Josh. However, we are running limited fuel cells at 50%, so that's only going to last you about maybe 17 laps maximum. So you're likely going to be seeing green flag pit stops both before and after that competition caution at the halfway point happens, in which we as well will observe a 3-minute moment of silence. So strategy-wise, that could shuffle up this race as well.
As I have to agree with you there. When, of course, this is the NASCAR Racing 2003 league that I had covered, but when Solstice Proline ran here, for example, Brian Mercurio was in that race, and he was very good with strategy, with saving fuel, and still being fast. So I think that Mercurio, for example, would be one of the drivers that can stay out front, save fuel, and maybe get away with not having to pit. But of course, it's how you use that right foot on the gas pedal.
And it's going to be chaotic as well. Of course, you're only going to be seeing a caution flag at that midway point. I heard the consolation race was a little bit crazy, as you mentioned right off at the top. So you got 41 cars trying to get down through that heartburn turn. And of course, the rest of this tricky 2.24 or 2.8 mile roval here at the Charlotte Motor Speedway. I think just keeping the car in one piece is going to be a big step as well.
I would say it's about survival. Absolutely. I mean, we saw, like I mentioned earlier in the NASCAR Cup Series, it was Jimmy Johnson going for that win that first race. Chase Elliott ends up in the wall in turn 1 the second year, somehow comes back and wins the race. I mean, it's about survival, or if you're stupid fast, you put it in the fence and then you just slice through the field. There's no knowing what's going to happen.
And the qualifying session is now done, so let's go trackside and take a look at your starting grid. And you talked about Brian Mercurio. He is on pole position for this one with a 1-minute 19.121. So he will pace us to the green flag tonight in his number 41 Toyota, and he will be joined double wide for the restart with the number 34 machine of Santiago Tires. Liam Brotherton will start from third, along with Riker Zimas in the number 4 spot. And Alan Bowes rounds out our top 5.
As Jake Nichols and Daniel Silvestri, 6th and 7th. 4th row of the grid is Brandon Bowie. Then we have Raja Karuth, Zach Novak rounding out the top 10.
Continue on down through. Kenny Brady finds himself in the number 11 spot with Chase Alvey in the number 12 position. Dylan Alt back in 13th. Donovan Strauss will start in the number 14 spot, and the 9th of Brandon Hoff is 15th.
As Zachary Robertson, Austin Johnston, Blake Sasser, Ethan Smith, and Jacob Fisher. Interestingly, 1-minute 20 is Robertson's lap, and then it goes to 1-minute 20.3 for Fisher in 20th.
Yeah, so your top 20 cars are so separated by just 1 second on the intervals. Then on the back, Nate S. Stewart will start from 21st, and somebody by the name of Ray Alfala starts 22nd in his VRS Chevy. You've got Jake Poulin in 23rd spot, Jonathan Taylor 24th, and Evan Rice P25.
As Sean Butler and Nick Olson 26th and 27th. Then we go to Steven Rosales, David Schildhouse, and Lee Overton in P30.
And as the field begins to roll, Justin Patello 31st, Chris Overland who qualified in from the last chance race 32nd, with Austin Drake 33rd, Nick DeGroot 34th, and your second driver in for the LCQ, the 119 to Trey Shuttlesworth.
As the final couple of drivers in this race, we have Covey Moore, Eric Pruitt, Julian Perez, Ethan Kurtz, Garrison Hogan, and shotgun on the field, a guy I know very well by the name of Michael Frisch in P41.
And he's going to have a front row seat, really, to all the chaos that heads in front of him as we pace around Concord, North Carolina. Let's talk more about this Charlotte Motor Speedway. As I mentioned off at the top in this one, Josh, it is a 2.28-mile road course, 17 quarters, and admittedly, it doesn't feel like that many, but the bus stop on the backstretch counts for 2. The chicane on the front counts for 3. There are a lot of, slow speed, off-camber quarters, and, admittedly, these Cup cars aren't really built to go around a road course, which is why I love the Roval. It is such a unique challenge, and that's why you see, again, some very recognizable names having made it to this feature. One more call out to all the drivers who attempted to qualify and paid in that entry fee. Overall, we have raised more than $1,000 in this event already. To both, as I mentioned, the Floyd Memorial Fund and the NAACP Legal Defense Fund. And we're about moments away from getting tonight's action underway.
As off the top of my head, I want to say it was about 80 people. I could be wrong. About 80 drivers attempted to qualify for this race. So to be in an LCQ earlier on and only know that you have 2 spots, that's why we probably saw that dive bomb move on the final lap. And that was just for a consolation race. So I can't imagine what's going to happen in 44 laps time when we go to that chicane on the last lap.
Yeah, the bragging rights on the line as well. Everybody here, of course, to support a good cause, to use their voices to try to project and inspire change in our communities. But it is a race. They do want to win it. It sounds like as well that some Vibe Check merch going to be going out to the race winner tonight. And as well, an anonymous donor has reached out and they have offered to donate to the winner's choice of a justice reform organization in their name. Of course, you can see all the different paint schemes and various causes on the cars on track here this evening. Many of them sporting either the hashtag say their names, hashtag justice for Floyd, as well the hashtag Black Lives Matter. We encourage you to be a part of the conversation tonight and use the hashtag George Floyd 100 as you take in tonight's action on our network with our producer downstairs, Zach Johnson, for Josh Burns and myself, Evan Pisoko. The pace car is down and in, and the field in the hands of your pole sitter, the number 41 machine of Brian Macario. He's going to bring them through the chicane, and we say, let's go. Robo Racing from Charlotte. The George Floyd 100 is green.
Clean into turn 1 with Mercurio and Tires, Brotherton, Bose, and Rasimus, the top 5.
And the tricky part now is they work into the infield here because it is going to be the right-hander here. Very slow, though, just about 65 miles an hour. We talked about things maybe being chaotic. So far, so good. There's some side-by-side outside of the top 10. Your top 3 breakaway good early on. Maybe some chaos at the back, but impressed for this opening lap as they'll now leave the infield portion of the racetrack and back up at what is turn 8, but on to turn 1 on the oval.
As let's take a look. The top 3 started to break away, but Mercurio pulled away, exiting the road course onto the oval. As Tires getting close as well. We're going to try our first attempt into the bus stop. Inside is Brotherton on Tires, locks it up, and both make contact, and around the 4 goes. Gets hit by the 68 Erasmus as they stack it up. The 24 and Nichols involved as well.
And Santiago Tires finally gets it back going, but they're 3 wide now, backing up and onto the banking after you could talk about maybe dive bomb moves. The 10 and the 4 went into the corner side by side. Admittedly, I don't think the 10 was going to make the corner there. I think he had an opportunity, but just not too wide. Got hard on the brakes, locked it up, and Brotherton got into him. But again, we mentioned the only yellow flag period you're going to be seeing here tonight is at the points of the competition cautions. So this one stays green. That really benefits your pole sitter, Brian Macario, because he's now 3 seconds ahead of the new placed car in second. That's Alan Bose up to P2, who started in 5th. Of course, Lotbots lost for Brotherton, who drops into 4th. But Santiago Tires got the worst of that. He now finds himself in 8th.
As it didn't take us 44 laps to have an incident into turn 1. It only took us about half a lap. So much quicker than I thought. Running it wide, exiting the road courses, Brotherton, and into the wall. He might have had some suspension damage there, Evan. And it looks like he's parked it. I don't know if he's going to try and get back going to wait for the field to go by, or is he done?
They'll stop there.
Still stopped. Of course, 40 cars going by. We'll have to see. as he is now dead last. Well, I lied. He's in front of Jake Poulin, but still way back in the field after having that mishap on the first lap.
Yeah, tough break. And he hit that concrete wall on the right-hand side there, and that's kind of one of those off-camber where the banking actually kind of drops you off and into the concrete wall. So he hit that, then hit the actual wall back up on the safer barrier, and a lot of damage. Obviously takes Brotherton way out of this race. Some other drivers, though, on the move. Zach Novak, you mentioned, defending champion of the eNASCAR Coca-Cola iRacing Series, started this in 10th. He has already driven his way up to the number 4 spot. Not scot-free, though. A little bit of right front damage on his number 90 machine, so he had contact at some point. But the car, I think, a little bit worse for wear, but better than it could be, and he is on the move right now. By the way, Alan Bose, Daniel Silvestri, 2-3. They are catching Brian Beccurio, your race leader. That advantage right now, 2.2 seconds.
As I've been just taking a look throughout the field, a lot of these guys have some rear end damage in some form. For example, Chris Overland's got some right rear damage. Chase Alvey, Jonathan Taylor. I think a lot of these guys, because iRacing did, correct me if I'm wrong, release a new tire model for the Cup cars. Maybe these guys are trying to get used to that, and they're so used to the old one, they haven't gotten enough practice on this new one, if you will.
Yeah, new tires and a new damage model back to back. That's partially why that Oval World Championship Series has kind of such a big buffer here, is to give iRacing some leeway if anything needs to be patched up. But of course, we saw this damage model on the iRacing service make its debut in the Zarka Bernard Series styled cars, and a lot of the stock cars, of course, now on that new damage model, in addition to changing up the tires, are kind of all things that drivers are working with. We'll get the video picture back to you in just a moment. You're not missing anything about the front of the field as Brian Beccurio, his advantage has kind of stabilized itself now. Alan Bose and Silvestri, I'm not lying to you, they were catching him, but he has now pulled away just a little bit and seems pretty content for the moment. And of course, we see all the different, as I mentioned, paint schemes being represented as there's a wreck in turn number 3. Race Control doing their job to let the drivers know where the issues are and kind of give them a heads up, because, again, doesn't matter how many cars are in it. The only time we're checking up is at the completion of lap 19.
As I've been taking a look through the field at the tail end of the field, I just caught Garrison Hogan crashing in the roval, but that's not what I wanted to mention. I mentioned that some of these guys are pitting early. We talked about pit strategy in the opener. Some of these guys might be pitting now to take advantage of the track position that they can get, but it's one of my favorite things about road course racing. You have to hold the delta. It's not mentioned that often in oval racing, but you pit, you run down the pit lane, the service, all of that fun stuff is a certain time amount. If you don't have that time amount, you're trying to race this guy, he might either pass you or you'll pass him. And that's fascinating strategy on a road course.
Your more drivers down pit lane. Justin Botello down for the very back of the pack in his number 20 machine. And of course, we mentioned that it was about 17 laps max. So maybe these drivers trying to get themselves to the point where they could two-stop it. Obviously, that's going to be necessary, but maybe go for the second stop either at that halfway break or just a little bit past that competition yellow, because you have to pit at some point. So maybe they figure, let's do it 5 laps in as opposed to with 5 laps to go until we know that that break is coming. It appears that Chris Overland as well, unfortunately, has had to park for the moment his ride spin 16. He actually crashed his Ford Mustang out of the left-hander in turn number 1. Overland walked away with the win in the LCQ race to get into this main event, but unfortunately, his George Floyd 100 comes to an end early.
And Nate Stewart also having some technical difficulties, so he says, I don't want to ruin anyone's race, and he has parked his car as well. I want to bring up one of our hard chargers, Evan. Michael Frisch started shotgun on the field in car number 58, sitting in 26th place. So after 5 laps, he's carved through almost half of this field. Let me tell you, this kid, one of the fastest guys that I know in sim racing. We raced together in Solstice Racing. He was like 3 seconds a lap faster than me. I can't figure out where his speed's coming from.
Hey, there's a lot of drivers who maybe missed the mark of the qualifying session that are up big. You mentioned Frisch up 16, Ethan Kurtz ahead of him, plus 16 now as well. You got somebody like Covey Moore up 18, Julian Perez up 19, as a combination of drivers pitting and some drivers being involved in incidents early, dropping them towards the back of the running order, has kind of given them an opportunity to make up some time. And yes, if you start P40 and you go up to P20 in the case of Julian Perez, that's great. The problem is it's not, what the lap times you're going to be running on your own now is. It's the fact that, you got to work through so much traffic. I could be plus 20 spots at a P20, Josh, but I would still be right now some 34 seconds or so off of the race lead if I'm outside of the top 20. So that's why qualifying is so important in this matter of a race, and that's how strategy could be a factor maybe later on.
So that's why I think a lot of these guys are pitting early, because you pit early, you get all that open track in front of you, and while all these guys are racing and beating and banging and all that fun stuff, you get all the clear track, crank out some clean laps, get all that gap back, and you never know. When they pit close to that competition caution, you might be in the catbird seat and say, hey, I might take the lead.
And just watching now some of these battles, you mentioned that, Mercurio is about 3.6 seconds ahead of Bose. So he's been pretty stable. And, even some of the drivers as well that we've kind of checked in with throughout the field that have gained spots, they are a little bit rough around the edges. It's very easy here to make a mistake on your own, to get into the wall. We saw that with Brotherton up at the front of the field. Not only did he have that contact with Santiago Tires, but of course got into the fence coming out of the infield portion of the racetrack in between turns 7 and 8. So there is no risk for the 41, but I think Mercurio getting out in front of the chaos has really helped his cause, because that race car is clean. He will, though, have to start dealing with lap traffic pretty soon.
As I've been keeping an eye on the top 3, as I was about to mention that Silvestri and Bose were faster than Mercurio, but they've been flip-flopping back and forth for the last couple laps. But our defending eNASCAR Coca-Cola iRacing champion, Zach Novak, squeaked past Silvestri for the 3rd spot. So last lap, Novak ran a 1:22.805, Mercurio a 1:79, but you have to think Novak was worried about the 97. So I think car number 90 is coming and coming fast.
Yeah, that was about a second almost entirely slower than the average that we have been seeing out of Novak, because lap prior to that was a 1:22.0. Of course, you could maintain that. That would be about a tenth or 2/10 faster than Mercurio at the front of the field. Of course, his concern is he does have damage left front, and then as well basically the entire right-hand side. Good to see that new damage model on the iRacing service at work, because you could really see the sheet metal crinkled up on both sides of that car. But he's 6.5 seconds behind. Yeah, 2/10 better is significant, but he is also at a significant disadvantage. Granted, we're only a lap 8 of 44. Competition yellow, pit stops as well, plural for your race leaders up at the front of the field still to come. But all things to keep in mind as Silvestri now falling back into the clutches of Kenny Brady. I think a battle for P4 and 5 maybe soon.
As Mercurio through the chicane, we're going to take a look and see throughout the field. Pretty spread out, I'd have to say, here on lap number 8, lap number 9, as we get close to a quarter of the way through. We're just in the middle of a pit strategy cycle. Some of these guys trying to rush it to the end. Some of the guys pitted early, and it's what fascinates me. We have a little bit of smoke through the Roval. Not sure why. No issue there, but this is the point in the race early on where you just have to deal with potentially all this strategy, and there's not a lot of stuff on track going on.
And especially for Mercurio, I mean, you have to worry about losing focus. Again, there's so many different braking points, shifted points, that these cars are very loose as the battle for 4th is on. Brady forcing his way to the inside of Silvestri. Couldn't do it that time. You just saw a spin in the chicane on the back straightaway with the 42 machine, who gets back rolling. So that was issues down the running order for Julian Perez, who we mentioned was one of the best drivers speed-wise. And here going to be the pass for 4th, as to the inside it comes the 54 machine. And Kenny Brady now from 11th up to 4th makes that pass on Silvestri.
Not discrediting what Brady did at all, but I think what helped him, Silvestri spun the tires entering the oval, got a little bit loose, and that top speed advantage right at the chicane braking point, I think that's what helped Brady. And Silvestri might be burning through his tires, I wonder.
Well, you mentioned the new tire model. Drivers trying to get used to that balance where, of course, you want to be aggressive, but you don't want to eat away and burn up those tires. And as you can see, kind of late afternoon conditions here at the Charlotte Motor Speedway. The realistic weather at iRacing's Dynamic Sky are being used. So track temp is 93 degrees Fahrenheit, only a little bit higher than the actual temps of 87, but hot, slick racetrack. And as well, I think just the backs and forths and how aggressively you're going to be using up the curbs, which is fast but is abrasive on your car, are all different factors in longevity of a run. Again, if we didn't limit the fuel on these cars, you'd be aiming for 35 or so laps on a fuel run. But because it is limited, maybe that allows these drivers to go a little bit more aggressive, knowing that the tires only have to go 17 laps instead of double that.
I'm looking through the average lap time of all these guys, and the fall off, unless your name is Brian Mercurio or Alan Bowes, is staggering. A lot of these guys are in the point 24, 25. I think there was contact with Brady and Silvestri. I'll have to take another look, but a lot of these guys running 24, 1 minute 25. I don't know if that's fall off or just conservation, but Brian Mercurio, Alan Bowes, they're able to stay on it here up front.
And the contact you saw was Santiago Tires. We mentioned that he got hit by Liam Brotherton earlier, and he made the same mistake that time. He had dove to the inside on the 97. Machida Silvestri hit him, and the 4 was actually the one who split out. Now you see on pit lane, that is the number 54 machine, the 10 on timing and scoring of Kenny Brady, who halfway through this first run to the competition yellow gives up a top 5 running position to dive down to the pit lane for service as somebody is spinning on the back straightaway. But we're going to keep going. There's a lot of smoke into the bus stop. That is Covey Moore, I think, in the 87, got tagged by Ethan Kurtz, and some damage as well to Lee Overton down there.
As pitting as well as Silvestri, so I want to keep an eye on those guys if they can try and pip Novak and Bowes through the pit lane. But it all depends on when those guys pit. Brady has cycled back out to about 9th or 10th in front of Ray Alfala in car number 2. So if I'm not mistaken, 4-time champion, I think all-time race winner in the eNASCAR Coca-Cola iRacing Series. Not doing too bad.
He's doing pretty good, and, you know, a little bit of a modified paint scheme as well on Ray Alfala's car tonight. Good to see, as we mentioned, all of the different causes being shown on these drivers' entries, and that's Ray's normal VRS paint scheme, but representing black and dark gray colors tonight in support of this George Floyd 100. He is your 10th placed car at the moment. And just kind of looking through, Brian Mercurio down onto the pit lane. So there's your race leader who's going to give up the number 1 position to come down to the pit lane. And that will hand the lead over to Alan Bowes, who was about 5 seconds behind him. So Mercurio, race pace-wise, has been the best car so far this evening. He's back out with service completed. Curious if Bowes maybe responds the next time by in his Total Advantage Motorsports Toyota, or if he opts to push it, because again, you're about 5 laps away from running dry. So if you haven't pitted yet, that pit stop going to be coming soon.
The last lap for Bowes, once it pops up for me, 124.054. So we have to keep an eye on him to see. I mean, Mercurio had a big gap, but it's interesting. Will Novak pip Bowes on the pit stop rotation as Novak exits the road course now? Alan Bowes in oval turn 3 and 4. And I think car 25 dipping down into pit lane now. Very tricky pit lane entrance. So we'll have to keep an eye on the 90 and the 25. Or 21, excuse me, there.
And you got to bunch out for that pit lane wall as well. Something that you've never had to really worry about at Charlotte Motor Speedway. Of course, if you're that far right, you're likely looking at a pit lane penalty. But either way, It's a good way to damage the race car. There was some contact as well on the back straightaway. Zach Novak, I think, missed the bus stop by a little bit, so he will lose a position to Raja Karuth, who, as we mentioned off of the top of the broadcast, one of the people who put in so much work to make this event happen, the Rev Racing driver as well as the development driver for Richmond Raceway Esports. He wants to be in the Coke Series one day, and he and the defending Coke Series champion, Zach Novak, fighting on the infield.
As Bose did get pipped by Novak and Brady. So I don't know if Alan Bose had a good pit in lap. The guy that loves this still is Brian Mercurio. His gap now, roughly, according to last lap, 4.2 seconds over, actually, sorry, that was Bose over Tires. So we'll have to see when it refreshes this next lap.
And just looking as well, Mercurio only really fell back to P3 where he sits right now. I mean, he's not that bad. So he is still your net leader on the strategy here. Nobody was able to kind of leapfrog him. We're still waiting on Tires and Bowie to pit from first and second position. They are on the banking on what is turns 3 and 4 on the oval right now. No pit stops this time through for either of those drivers as lap number 13 goes into the back pocket. So the waiting game continues. Their advantage over Mercurio, even with the fact that he's pitted, is not that big. 41 car closing in on a battle for P2.
As Tires in car number 4, according to timing, car number 34. Very confusing here in this race today. But Tires, 1 minute 23.896. Bowie, a 1:24.501, as Mercurio passes Bowie for second on the road, but his last lap was a 1 minute 19.827. Evan, that just shows new tires versus old tires. That's insane. 5-second difference.
Yeah, and we look at, kind of intervals when you're on a normal oval race, and, you think about 2 seconds. That kind of range is what is average between, spent tires at the end of a run and fresh tires, and that's kind of with limited places to mess up. I mean, more or less, especially, you talk about the competitive level in a field like this, or, in a Coke Series race, if you would. I mean, there's very little places to lose or gain big swings of time. That's not the case here at Charlotte. I mean, there are so many different ways that you can make up time, that you can lose time. Really is a racer's racetrack, as that pass for second has happened. Mercurio around Bowie. Still waiting on those top 2 cars up front, as well as, I believe, maybe Jake Nichols and Ray Alfala to come down to the pit lane for service, unless it's just wrapping up for them now. But they still have to pit, I believe, and that means they'll be in very momentarily as well. But about 3/4 of the field decided to go for the pit stops early. The cars left, about a handful still needing to come in.
As Tires is trying to make this strategy work, he still has to, he's going to have to pit, obviously. We've talked about that fuel consumption all evening long, but the fact that I just watched Mercurio through the whole infield catch and pass the 4, again, just speaks volume to the amount of new tires. I mean, Jonathan Taylor's off the lead lap in 38th place and just drove by the 4, like nothing, like he was standing still. So, I mean, I'm more of a dirt road, more of a rallycross guy. I like road course stuff. I don't really get into the cup cars too much, but the fact of all this tire fall off on the cup cars on the service just boggles my mind.
And it is a tough car to drive. I mean, we talk about differences and splits, fastest to the slowest. And we already talked about how, these drivers had to qualify into this race to begin with. But this is not just, any random race. I mean, these are some really great drivers. And, you talk about some of the drivers at the top levels of sim racing who, could probably and would normally be practicing and putting in time, getting ready for their next world championship race, whatever, series it is that they compete in. And instead, they felt it necessary to be in this event tonight. And that's why right off at the top, we not only thanked, the organizers behind the event, all of you at home tuning in, but really the drivers, because without them, there would be no race. Because, Josh, I promise you, I don't think at least, nobody would want to watch me and you race, because that would not be nearly as entertaining.
if they want to watch people crash, maybe. I'm not very good at stock cars. I'm not very good at turning left either. If it has dirt, maybe. But we have to remember the real reason of this race. And unfortunately, I think all of us agree that we wish this race wasn't happening at all because of what happened with George Floyd in Minnesota. And it's crazy to think about how it has crossed the whole country. And we won't go into too much detail, but I bought a ring for my fiance, her wedding band, and we went to the mall to try and pick it up 2 days ago, and it was closed. I was like, well, we can't go do that because everything is spreading everywhere, but it's crazy to see the country unite about it, to be honest.
Yeah, we have seen, I mentioned off at the top, but, I said to my normal, we're happy that you're with us, but at the same time, kind of disappointed that you even have to be with us on this broadcast tonight. And I mean, this is not new. This is an issue that we have seen, not just, in our country here, but kind of across the world for far too long. And we have seen movements, we have seen the hashtags come and go. We have seen protests, but I don't think we've seen it on this level. And it's reached all 50 states, dozens of countries across the globe. And that's the idea behind this race is we all love racing. We all love sim racing. These drivers do what they love to do. But the end of the night is for that higher purpose. And, we mentioned off at the top that all the drivers who competed in this race here tonight had to pay their entry fee. And that went to either the Floyd Memorial Fund or the NAACP Legal Defense Fund. There's so many different great organizations that you can donate money to. And we encourage you at home that if you're able to join the drivers and join us as well in making contributions and using your voice to make sure that we can inspire positive change.
As I've been taking a look through this pit strategy as Mercurio is taking lap 18, I noticed that Kenny Brady got by Santiago Perez, but he started 11th. Novak started 10th, and they're up into the top 5. I mean, Mercurio said sayonara, bye, thanks for the race. He's 7.3 seconds according to last lap ahead of the field. He's going to be the guy that hates to see this competition caution because he's going to lose that big gap that he's got.
He would love for this to shake out. He is actually able to take the race lead away from Santiago Perez just before Perez came to the pit lane this time. Ethan Kurtz now on the radio saying that he's going to be coming down to the pit lane this time through as well. So again, if you haven't pitted, this is kind of the very max of that. We heard about 15 to 17, the fuel window, stretching to 18, I think is about as far out as you're going to get. But yeah, I mean, right now, his advantage over Kenny Brady is more than 6 seconds. Brady with a little bit newer tires, I believe, actually older tires, but had one lap before Mercurio there, but has closed the gap in just a little bit. But, he knew this was coming. So maybe this isn't even, 110% out of the 41 car. If this is him cruising, knowing that, of course, we're going to have a competition yellow at halfway, then if I'm the rest of the field, I'd be concerned about being able to catch this 41 when we do it after that yellow and, of course, race out to the end for lap 44 as Mercurio has taken lap number 19. At the end of this lap for your race leader is when we will see the comp yellow.
As I have to finish your point, Evan, this is Mercurio cruising. He would run Solstice Racing, be seconds ahead of the field, and be just cruising. And he would then pit, get new tires, say, well, I guess I got to start pushing, and then obliterate the whole field. On the other side of the coin, I think Kenny Brady has aced this strategy on this first stint because obviously gridded 11th and 2nd. Now he gets through the competition caution. That gives him the track position. If I look at the last lap, 1 minute 22.712, Mercurio was a 10th slower than that. In front of Mercurio, some lap cars here, Jonathan Taylor, Nick DeGroot, and Nick Olson. No issue, well, nearly an issue for Mercurio, but the pace between the top two, very similar as Mercurio comes off of NASCAR Turn 4, down to the chicane to begin the comp yellow.
And he has to be careful with the lapped cars in front as he comes across the start-finish line this time through. And the caution flag is now out. So that is your comp yellow. Of course, those drivers in front of Mercurio really wanted to stay ahead of him because they maintain their lead lap status. They're not going to be trapped a lap down to big names like Ray Alfala, a lap down. And some of the other drivers, David Schildhouse, Chris Overland, some of the names that we mentioned earlier that are no longer in this race, off of the lead lap, going to basically take them out of contention. So 26 of the 41 cars were able to stay within one lap of a bad, fast Brian Mercurio through the opening 19 laps of this race.
If I look at the fastest lap for Mercurio, let me take a look. Fastest lap was a 119.827. That was his out lap, his pit exit lap. And then he kind of averaged off into the 20, 21, 22 second bracket. So that first lap on fresh tires, it still is a stupid quick lap.
It's crazy. I mean, what these drivers are able to do, and they're going to catch up to the pace car the next time by. So pit lane not going to be open yet. Mercurio, of course, had just passed the start-finish line, so he's going to go all the way around to catch up. So it'll take a minute here for all these drivers to group up. And the competition yellow, two purposes. It is a competition yellow. It will group everybody else back up and will give us an exciting start to the second half of this George Floyd 100. But as well, as you mentioned off at the top, once all these cars get together, we will bring them down pit road for a 3-minute moment of silence to remember the life of George Floyd. And at that point, once that is completed, then the race will resume. So kind of twofold here. And of course, I think the moment of silence, the main reason and kind of the big takeaway from this is the field now is starting to catch up on the back straightaway. Pace car is there and has issued the fields, and we will see everybody brought down to the pit lane next time by.
As Mercurio, so we have all these cars. I believe that we're on the tail end of the lead lap. No, they were the cars one lap down. As my knowledge lacks in this, but I can't recall if there will be service allowed during this caution or if there will be wave arounds. So we'll have to see when they come down pit lane. But if there are wave arounds, Ray Alfala, I think, will be the lucky dog.
And that would be big because he was that bubble driver, 26 on the lead lap. Ray, or actually, it's going to update now, just 25 cars scored on the lead lap. Ray in position number 26 would be the first driver lap down. That would mean, the likes of Ethan Kurtz, Trey Shuttlesworth, who finished second in the last chance qualifier race, would kind of just miss out. And at that point, not in contention for the race win, which, like we mentioned off at the top, do all these drivers want to win this race? Yes. But at the end of the day, again, I think it's just being in this event and showing support for the cause. And primarily, again, for a lot of these drivers who are more well-known in the sim racing community, I mentioned pro drivers and streamers using their platform to amplify the message of this George Floyd 100. And that is kind of the overarching picture beyond what is, at the end of the day, just a sim race.
As the field will be led down pit lane by race leader Brian Mercurio. As, like we've mentioned so many times before, as safety car stays on track, of course, Mercurio leads us down pit lane. We will observe that moment of silence here as the field comes down pit lane in the memory of George Floyd and, unfortunately, countless many others due to all these incidents. Yeah,
the cars are going to go into their pit stalls. We will, I believe, not be allowed to take service competition-wise until possibly the next time through. And I think fitting that the car at the front of the field has our logo on the hood tonight with the George Floyd 100 and the hashtag Black Lives Matter on the banner. As this race comes to a halt, so do we, and we observe 3 minutes of silence in memory of George Floyd and all those others who have lost their lives. And as the field now rolls, pit lane will be open the next time by, and we get set to resume this George Floyd 100. Want to encourage you to help us make a difference tonight, and you can donate to the various organizations that we've talked about. You can donate to the Floyd Memorial Fund by going to gofundme.org/F/George Floyd. You can also donate to the NAACP Legal Defense Fund at naacpldf.org. And there's so many different ways to get involved. I mean, as we speak, Josh, broadcasting this race from our homes and doing our parts, there's protests happening across the country where people are trying to use their voices. And if you may want to know how you can get involved or what else you can do, I think one of the favorite sites that I've seen is if you go to blacklivesmatter.carrd.co. It'll bring you to a website that links you to petitions that you can sign, how to text and call to get involved, who you can donate to, resources if you want to protest at a local rally in your hometown. So many different ways to get involved, and however you can help make a difference and inspire change, I think is my favorite part about this community, getting together to do this event. And I think as well as our sim racing demographic in general, Josh, kind of skews younger. Our younger generation is going to make a difference in this world.
I've been around the sim racing community. Let's see, I'm turning 24 this year. I've been around for about 12 years. I've seen people grow. I've seen it evolve. And there's one thing that I've always noticed, and everyone in this community, as far as I can see, everyone loves each other. Everyone considers each other a big, happy family. I always joke on the NASA Rallycross broadcasts, people hate each other when you jump into these sim rigs. They hate each other. They want to put each other into the fence. But when you jump off and you're talking to one another, you're talking to your friends. Lead lap cars are pitting this lap, Evan. We have Mercurio, of course, race leader, who has led us down the pit lane. Then the lap cars will pit. I'm interested to see if we have some cars that stayed out. We'll have to wait until everyone rotates around, and then we see the lapped cars next lap.
Yeah, and just checking, Mercurio is the first driver in, first driver out. My timing and scoring has Jake Nichols and Santiago Tires as having maybe not gotten service as of the last time by. Of course, they came down pit lane for the moment of silence, but they did not come back down pit road that next time through when pit road was open. So I think Tires and Nichols deciding not to pit. Of course, lights still on top of the pace car. They could certainly do so the next time by, but keep in mind, Josh, 44-lap race. This restart's going to be somewhere close to 20 or 19 laps to go. I think that the cars who stayed out, in Tires and Nichols, certainly going to have to pit. But maybe, could Mercurio stretch it for the 19? I mean, is that going to be the advantage between staying out or not? I think how long this yellow period goes, the difference of one lap could be a big difference here on if the 4 and the 24 could maybe make it. If they, like I think, have to pit, will there be enough of a buffer for the cars who just pitted to make it to the distance without having to pit again on that limited 50% fuel cell?
I think I have to disagree with those two guys' strategy, if I'm being honest. I mean, Mercurio pitted at the caution. He's going to have the fuel, and plus, we remember the rough estimate of one caution lap is about 2 green flag laps. So if we go back green with roughly, let's say, 19 laps to go, Mercurio might be good to the finish. I mean, it's going to be tough for the top 2 here if they don't pit this time by to hold this lead.
And not only is it going to be difficult strategy-wise, we'll see if they do decide to come down to the pit lane this time, although would seem ill-advised because they were both, relatively good running race cars before this, and they would drop to the back and they will stay out, which is what we expected, and should see the lights go out on top of the pace car this time by. Not only is there the strategy question, Josh, but the other question is, take the strategy out of the picture. I mean, I think it's going to be a big factor, but for a moment, ignore that. can they hold off the 41 regardless of the strategy? Because it's not like he's way back in traffic. He's going to be on the bumper of the 4 when we get set for the 2-wide restart here.
Knowing Mercurio, knowing with what we've seen, I'd say it's pretty close to impossible. Of course, anything can happen in motorsport. Typically does. But it's going to be a tough ask for those guys. And especially with the little bit fresher tires. I know you said ignore strategy, but think about it this way. Getting back onto the oval. We saw that pass with, I think it was Brady and Silvestri. When Silvestri spun his tires, these guys are going to be on the restart with a little bit worn tires. They might spin them. Hopefully they don't, of course. But then Mercurio is going to gobble them right up.
So the restart is going to come 24 laps down, 20 laps to go. And I think that's too far for somebody like a Mercurio and basically everybody not the 4 and the 24 up front. Of course, 2 of our eNASCAR Coca-Cola iRacing Series drivers, Santiago Tires, in his track pass entry, the NBC-sponsored ride for Latardi Sports. You get the Mode Media House Ford on the outside of Nichols. I'm thinking because we're going to get the full 20 laps here, Josh, that even the guys that pitted here are going to have to pit. I don't know if this is going to be a race-winning move by Tires and Nichols because I just think that Mercurio is the best car right now. However, as we get a delay now, one more time around, the lights go back on top of the iRacing safety car, so that could be a difference. Again, 1 lap could be huge. But again, even if they can make it, and I think they will, and I think everybody's going to have to pit, and they'll still get a top 5 out of it, which is good for the track position. But I'm not sure that it's enough of a swing for the fence to knock the 41 off, of course, unless Mercurio has some sort of an issue here.
Luckily, on iRacing, there is no issue with jumping curves and flipping your car, as in that Solstice race that I keep mentioning. Of course, NASCAR 2003, an older sim compared to iRacing, the chicane was broken on the back straightaway. You'd hit the curb, you'd flip the car. That's the only reason why Mercurio did not win that race. So with no issue like that, and us seeing that he's one of the fastest cars, we're beating this dead horse, but really, it's going to be hard for these top 2. I mean, this caution is really, I can't really tell if it's helping just the top 2 or Mercurio or everyone. Mercurio loves this because he can stretch that fuel farther. The top 2 love this because they're not overheating their tires. It's a really hard one to call.
Yeah, it's not a one-size-fits-all benefit as we come by the start-finish line this time through, and the lights will go out, so we should be going green the next time by. Because, it doesn't clearly benefit this driver, that driver. The delay doesn't clearly benefit this driver, that driver. It is certainly very even across the board. Mentioned there after our moment of silence all the different ways that you could get involved, and did want to give another call to everybody, and specifically the 3 people who really put this event on. Monad Rahman, who is an engineer for Rickware Racing, had a huge part in this, working in coordination, as we mentioned, with Raja Karuth, who is in the race tonight, a Rev Racing driver, a NASCAR Drive for Diversity graduate, and a development driver with Richmond Raceway Esports as well, Brad Perez, and the work that those 3 have done to organize this event, the drivers, all of you tuning in, and we get to have some fun here because we're going to have a 19 lap to go restart with some strategy questions in the air and a handful of some of the best sim racers on the service. More than 100 tried to qualify into this feature. 41 made it all the way, and I can pick out about, I think, a half a dozen or so that I think, Josh, have a realistic shot at winning this, but I still put the 41 Toyota as my favorite.
As some people might be wondering why we've had the safety car lights go on and go off and go on, there has been, I think, due to the moment of silence, there was a scoring bug with the service, so that's why they've had to fix it up. We've had to have a couple extra laps under the safety car. There might be a couple of drivers that get a black flag from the service, but no worries there. It will be all cleared due to the unique nature of what we're doing today here in Charlotte. Glad you can join us here on STN Racing. Josh Mertz, Evan Pasoko in the commentary box, bringing you live coverage of the George Floyd Memorial 100. We are on lap number 25 of 44. We're getting ready to go back green, Evan, and it's going to be a great restart indeed.
Green this time by, and of course we saw it with the initial start. The benefit is going to be, of course, that your control car could bring us to the green flag a little bit earlier, than at the actual chicane. But you're basically going to have drivers accelerating into that final chicane, which counts as turns 15, 16, and 17 here could be a little bit dicey. Pace car off it in, though. There goes Santiago Tires. The green flag is back in the air, and there are 19 laps to go in the George Floyd 100 for the Charlotte Motor Speedway Roval. No pit stop for Tires and Nichols, and they pull the advantage out of turns 1 and 2. The big stack up going to be behind the 21 car, as it is the 90 attack Novak on through around the 54 of Brady. This battle about P4.
What was interesting with Tires and Nichols, they played nice with one another. When the pace car pulled down, they nailed it. Mercurio had to sneak by the 54 of Brady. Brady is dropping like a rock, losing positions as we go through the field. Everyone playing nice, pretty much single file. We have Dylan Alt and Austin Drake side by side. But I think everyone's realized that you can't win the race on the first lap after a restart.
And even though that rings true, it hasn't stopped people in the past from trying. And it looks like that everybody that time through, I think, relatively under control. As we can see this group here again. This is the group from Alan Bowes on back, I believe, in the number 21 machine. So it is, in effect, the battle for fourth on the back, because those top two pulled away, and Brian Mercurio doing his job at trying to close in on them. But right here, basically, the best stuff on track right now.
As he nicked the wall coming out of the chicane, so did Alan Bowes, and Zach Novak to the inside of car number 21, and we will put Novak to fourth. The restart lap for him was a 1 minute 20.611, dealing with all that traffic about a second slower than the top three. But Tires and Nichols, Tires letting Nichols through. That's a bit interesting. I'm not sure there, but Mercurio closing on these two.
And I as well wanted to mention that we've made a point over the course of this race of talking about, all the different hashtags and causes. As you can see, the 6 car was turned around there just at a turn number 1 a little bit earlier on. I think that was Raja who got out of shape there. But as well, working lap number 27, Josh, I did want to mention that we have seen the hashtag Justice for Brianna on a lot of the cars here this evening as well. And today would have been Breonna Taylor's 27th birthday. So I did want to mention that on lap number 27. And I mentioned the website a little bit earlier that you could go to get links to be involved in so many more of the campaigns. BlackLivesMatter.carrd.co, and Justice for Brianna is one of them highlighted on there. So wanted to make a point of that as we go through lap 27.
As we take a look at that top three, Tires a little bit slower last lap because he did let Nichols through. And we're not just paying tribute to George Floyd tonight. Of course, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, of course, as well. A couple of the names that, unfortunately, we shouldn't know, realistically. We should have no idea who these people are. But due to the circumstances and, unfortunately, all those events that have happened, we have to talk about them. And to be honest, it's kind of a shame in 2020 that we have to, if I'm being frank. It really doesn't make any sense to me.
I'm curious if we can get a look at the 4 car. You mentioned all those other names, and to your point, I would rather not know who George Floyd is. George Floyd would rather, nobody know who he is. He'd rather just be living his life. And we talk about all the different causes. I do want to give a call to Austin Drake, who has a host of names as he's going through the bus stop and back straightaway right now. It actually may have lost the bumper and all that, but the hood of that car has countless names kind of
I have to
shameful that you
interrupt
can
you,
fill
Evan.
up the whole
Sorry
nose.
about
But
that. Sorry to interrupt you. See, Santiago Terres and Mercurio came together in the chicane, and they're stuck together. Mercurio. Looks like there was some netcode there.
yeah, they're stuck right now. They're going to get back going. So Brian Mercurio going to lose the battle for the race lead in this one after he and Tires, he just clipped the 4-car exit of the chicane, and then it took them about an extra 5 seconds or so to become disconnected. And unfortunately, that attempted pass on behalf of the 41 of Brian Mercurio, it was going to be for second. Admittedly, Josh, I don't know who I can put blame on that there, but Brian was real aggressive with those curbs, and I think that was him trying to make a pass where maybe it didn't need to happen right away.
As we'll just have to take a look and see here. As I'm taking a look, he had the run through the oval, and to be honest, I feel like he expected the 4 maybe to back off, but it looked like the 4 had a little bit of wheel hop entering the chicane, clipped the curb there. And of course, sim racing being sim racing, in real life, they should have never turned, but there was a foot of difference, and the whole lag aspect, that's what caused that incident.
And getting a second look at that incident now, we were talking about the 4 machine back of the pack with all those different names represented on it, and missed it live. But you saw the shot there, but he had the positioning, but he actually went to the outside. That set him up for the inside in turn 17, but I mean, even there on the bottom with that space that was there, I think a spirited move nonetheless, especially at that spot on the racetrack specifically. And listen, that's Mercurio knowing that, hey, maybe I'm going to have to pit. I need the track position soon. And it takes those 2 drivers out of the equation. And now Jake Nichols, who was the leader through all of this, he maintains. But somebody that we talked about earlier tonight, Josh, how about Zach Novak? He has filled the void left by those cars involved in the incident, and he is trying to chase down the 35 in a battle for the race lead. The last time by, he was a whole second faster than the 35 car, so he's on the move.
You took the words out of my mouth. And granted, in my experience, you'd figure a world champion of an oval series doesn't know how to turn right, but Zach Novak is proving me wrong that he does know how to turn right, as he is faster than Nichols by a considerable margin. That last lap, according to timing, it was a 1.15 second gap, and now it is 7/10. So an additional 4/10 cut off that gap. Novak is coming really quickly. Nichols should be worried.
Yeah, this is the fight that we're going to follow as these top cars race this one out, we believe, with both of them. Pit stop still looming before they could go the distance that last time by. They took 14 laps to go from Charlotte. Third place is Alan Bowes. He's about 3 seconds off of this in a battle with Kenny Brady. Their pace is about equal to that, or a little bit off of Zach Novak. So it does appear that this is going to be a 2-horse race at the front of the field here from the Roval. Clear traffic in front, no lap traffic for quite some time. But a damaged number 90 is Zach Novak. Just a little bit worse for wear through the field. Trying to chase down a much cleaner 24 Ford of Jake Nichols in front of him, who's done a better job tonight of keeping a nose clean.
As I'm trying to take a look at Mercurio to see if he can make up any of this time. It looked like the service did register damage on the front of his car due to that net code, but he was able to get by a couple people, including a guy named Ray Alfala. So, I mean, there's 13 laps to go. We know Mercurio's pace. P17, dare I say it, but I would still count the 41 into this, especially with how this pit strategy's going. We see Brandon Houff down pit lane, Daniel Silvestri down pit lane. So I wouldn't count the 41 out, to be honest.
And of course, well, we just saw contact in a battle for what was second. There is, no guarantee that Nichols and Novak may not come to blow. And if that would be the case, of course, Kenny Brady having made the pass at Alan Bowes would kind of be the driver there to pick up the pieces. So you always want to be in position. I'm sure Zach Novak wanted to be here, but I don't think he thought that Mercurio would make contact on the restart, wreck out of the race for all intents and purposes. And he would be basically gifted P2 with a shot at the 35. It's all about positioning yourself, and I think in many cases taking advantage of the mistakes of others.
As I'm looking at all these lap times throughout the field, from Mercurio onwards in the field, he is only slower than Nichols and Novak. He's faster than everyone else in front of him with a damaged car. I just let that sink in for a second. It boggles my mind.
On a pit stop here, Zach Novak to play the strategy card. So even those drivers who decided to come down pit road, they could not make it on fuel. Zach is inside of the fuel window at 12 laps to go. So he is going to give up the number 2 position just as he had gone to the bumper at Jake Nichols. He's going to come in and pit. He'll probably be the pit cycle Delta leader. And I think by virtue of getting the fresh tires soon, even if Jake Nichols comes in this time, Josh, and responds, I think that's going to be a race-ready move by Novak to get him the track position right away.
Let me look. So Mercurio, the reason why I'm so obsessed right now with Mercurio, I'll be honest with you, because of this incident that he had, I think he's in the mode of, I don't care what happens now. He's just going to push to the end because he's on the fringe of the fuel strategy. He's ahead of Novak. He's got nothing to lose now, especially. So that's what's really confusing me to see and exciting me to see what's going on. Nichols through the chicane, Brady through the chicane, as Mercurio off of oval turn 2.
Yeah, he'll head down the back straightaway. The 00 car there in the mix as well of Jake Poulin, and who will tuck in line. But that 41 machine, look out, slow 88 car in front. He is ahead of Zach Novak on the cycle. So Zach Novak has pitted. He is effectively behind Mercurio if that 41 car could go the distance. But again, Mercurio pitted. And we have seen that even the drivers who stayed out at the front of the field, I believe, are not going to be able to go the distance unless Jake Nichols up front still holding on hope that the 24 can go all the way because he did not pit the last time by. He'd be looking to stretch it. The restart came, Josh, 19 to go, but they did, 2-3 pace laps before that and at about a half a lap per. I mean, it's a big ask to be pushing that car nearly 20-21 laps on fuel.
But like I mentioned earlier, and I know we repeat ourselves often as commentators, but 1 lap under green is about 2 laps under caution. That fuel consumption, because the car is going slower, is a lower amount of fuel. So I'm thinking that some of these guys are going to try that strategy of just balls to the wall, and some of them are going to play it conservative, like Novak, and have to pit.
And Nichols is in lap 34. He is not going to be able to go on fuel. That should squash the pit strategy for anybody else who thought that they may have had an opportunity to go the distance. Nichols is in. That is it. You need fuel to get to the end of this race. The driver who stayed out is thrown in the towel. He is down and in for service. So where does he end up in relation to not only Alan Bose, who you see now going into turn number 1 and who has taken over the race lead, still leading to come down to the pit lane, but where does Jake Nichols end up in relation to Zach Novak? Again, Novak's the first one who pitted, and Novak just past pit lane exit. He has effectively past that number 24 machine. So Zach Novak now has cycled through to the pit Delta leader, and he is now in the catbird seat as the lead driver on those who are good on fuel and seems primed to drive this Sunoco Toyota to a race win this afternoon.
As I was looking for Mercurio in the 41 to continue to talk about how close he was, and he pitted as well. So this whole narrative of this race has changed because even Mercurio had to pit as well. So we'll have to see if Bose, if Bowie, Alvey, Rasimus, and Poulin go down pit lane. And even if they don't, Novak's there anyways, and he's much faster, 3-4 seconds faster than these other guys.
And just looking at the pit cycles, Novak is up to P6, and that doesn't mean that he's, only 6 cars are still yet to pit. There's several drivers kind of sprinkled throughout the field that need to come in The double O of Poulin is down to the pit lane for service. I think Rayon Fallon may be down shortly as he is now down and into the pit stall as well. So Zach Novak now up to P5. He awaits either Bose, Bowie, LV, and Rasibus to pit or just to catch him. Because again, Donati's so fast, he may catch some of these cars. Rasibus, in fact, the next car up the road before they even have to come down pit road.
As something I'd like to talk about, I know Jake Poulin from Solstice Racing from NASCAR 2003, but what I didn't know, well, I did know he was part of the staff of iRacing, but he actually helped bring North Wilkesboro back from the dead, at least virtually, and at the new Kentucky scan. So I guess you learn something new every day about some people.
I know the staff guys have been doing an iRacing staff series, and it has been good as well to see them support this event, and happy to have Jake on track with us this evening. One of many, like I said, just prominent figures in the iRacing circle to be in this race. iRacing has given this event several shout-outs on social media, so happy that iRacing has gotten behind the positive message of this race. And happy to have Jake in this one, who's looking to get a top 20. And again, you consider the over 100 drivers and the accolades at which they hold that tried to get into this. I'd be pretty darn happy with that result, as one driver's headed down pit lane shortly, but it is not your top 4 yet. Novak about to catch Rasibus for 4th.
As last lap for Novak, a 1 minute 21.377. Last lap for Rasibus, a 1 minute 23.631, 2.3 seconds. Novak says, "Thank you very much. I will take the 4th position." And he's going to close in on Alvey and Bowie. So I feel like they won't even have to pit for him to take the lead. He is considerably faster than these guys.
If this thing runs out the next 7.5 laps, he'll pass them anyways. There he goes. He already got Rasibus. Now around the 66 machine of Chase Alvey. So he is now up to 3rd. He wants another one to the inside of the 54 of Brandon Bowie. There's another pass, but he blew it way too deep and into the bus stop. And he took a shot to the back end after he made the pass on Bowie, but blew the bus stop. Bowie got into the back end of him. Novak going to be okay. The back end is showing some damage from that contact. Uncharacteristic mistake out of the 90 car.
So do you think that that damage is going to hurt him? The spoiler's fine. The bumper's really not in the wind. So it's not like a super speedway where it's hanging out there and it's going to hurt him, but would you imagine that it's going to hurt aerodynamics?
I think it's certainly going to hurt him. I don't think, rear end damage is as bad as, if he got the toe knocked in or got hit on the side or certainly got nose damage, because at that point you're always going to be concerned about the temps on the car. But I think it'll hurt Zach Novak a bit. I don't think it's going to hurt him enough to the point where it makes a substantial difference in this race. He still has a very healthy margin. Again, the driver he's really racing against at all of this is Jake Nichols, and his advantage there is about a second. Nichols has been a little bit better, though, recently, but I think if he loses this race, it's not because of the damage. It's because Nichols can put something together here at the end.
As I feel like you read my mind as you're talking, and I see Nichols closing, and Novak probably realized that that was a terrible thing, because Nichols has pretty much cut this gap in half. He's pretty much there on Novak through oval 3 and 4. Will Nichols maybe look, as he's got a huge run off the corner? I don't think he's going to try it this time as we get close to about 5 laps to go here in Charlotte.
And remember, the last time through, before the pit stops, as we take 6 laps to go from Charlotte Motor Speedway, it was the opposite. It was Novak chasing the 24 down. He pitted when he got onto his bumper. It was a little bit of a later trip down to the pit lane, so the tire benefit here is slightly in favor of the 24 Ford. Does he have enough? Novak is sideways that time, and we're going to drag race down the back straightaway. They'll go off into the up-hander, turn number 5. Novak goes wide, and Jake Nichols back to the race lead at lap number 39.
As Nichols easily passes Novak and making us look like liars, as we thought Mercurio was going to be out and away from the rest of the field because Nichols stayed out. Realistically, Nichols is in the lead, but remember, technically, Alan Bowes is still leading this race, but it's a 3-second difference between those two on lap time, and Bowes has not pitted. And I think all Novak can do is just watch the 24 pull away. The acceleration from that Mustang is incredible out of the bus stop.
And I think the one thing that he needs to hope for now is a role reversal of what he actually did. And that is, I think he still has a chance if there's a mistake. We saw Zach Novak make a mistake. That goes to show you that, of course, Jake Nichols can probably make a mistake. So I think that's all that Zach can hold on to here. Maybe he catches up to some lap traffic that slows him down or pressures him into a bobble, into a mistake. But I think if Jake Nichols can keep this car on track, this race is to lose now inside of 5 to go.
As I do think that damage hurt Novak. Last lap for Nichols was a 1 minute 21.831. Novak was a 23.51. Kenny Brady was about a tenth and a half, 2/10 faster than Nichols. So if Brady can dispatch Novak and get the clear track, I think that might become the race for the win. But it's a tall order for car number 54 to try and close in on the 24.
Well, we talked about the new damage model as well. That is going to be different to how these Cup cars take damage, how they respond to certain kinds of damage. Again, it is not always exclusively just the cosmetic damage, and kind of what the damage model will be known for is, the visual things that we can see on the car, but maybe it has treated the damage that the car actually received under the hood differently. But looking at his lap times, I'm not seeing Novak, consistent laps and then kind of out of nowhere just dropped off a big bit. He has slowed down significantly, but I mean, that last lap was a 1:22.5. That's his best lap in 5 times through. I think it's just that Ani felt the pressure, maybe overdrove it a little bit, and Jake Nichols was calmer under pressure. He is about to catch Alan Bowes, though. Again, Bowes still likely needing to come down to the pit lane for service. He is not going to be able to go the distance on the fuel he has now, but the pass for the race lead going to happen regardless because Nichols is closing.
I saw and heard Bowes on the clutch last lap in the chicane. He's trying, he's hoping, but Nichols says, hello, I'm going to take the race lead, getting very close onto the oval. And there's the pass for the race lead. Jake Nichols by Alan Bowes here in Charlotte as we get ready to take 3 laps to go. We'll have to keep an eye once again, like I said, on Kenny Brady to see if he can get close. We had a car around. It was Lee Overton in car number 16. No issue there. He's going to let these leaders by.
That was a self-spin as he got a little bit too hard onto the brakes and chattered the tires down and into the corner, split it out. But I think very attentively knew your race leaders were coming, got himself out of the way. So the top couple of cars could get through unobstructed. So that time by, as mentioned, 3 laps to go from Concord, North Carolina. Happy that you're with us at STN Racing for the George Floyd 100 from Charlotte Motor Speedway. We see the competition yellow, pit cycle strategy with a limited fuel cell, and in the end, it was Jake Nichols, who I think is going to prove me wrong if he can lock this one up. Because, Josh, I said I thought Novak going for the undercut was going to be a race-winning call, and the 24 was able to punch back.
I think you would have been right. But, again, we have to remember that bobble that he had in the chicane. That made him lose some time. Granted, not 2.6 seconds, what timing and scoring says, but I feel like that's the mistake. Plus the damage, as it might be some suspension issues. Novak goes by Bowes for second. Brady still trying to haul the mail to get by Bowes for third and take the fight to Novak. But Nichols, 1 minute 22.248, 0.8 of a second faster than Novak that last lap.
And I mentioned it when we saw Jake Nichols get around Zach Novak, who just passed Alan Bowes for second. Again, Bowes likely going to need fuel, but is doing his best to stretch that thing to the end of this race. We talked, I guess I should say, a lot about Brian Mercurio earlier in this race. It involved in that contact, the battle for second that took, I think, what had been the fastest car of the night by far and large out of contention. He's back up to P8, fighting for a good result in this one. But back to those cars up at the front, I think Jake Nichols needs to be worried about the lapped traffic, and admittedly, there's not a ton of that on the horizon for him, so I don't think he should be too nervous right now as long as he can keep his cool.
As I know, of course, we always talk about the leader. We always mention the lead battle, but I want to mention a couple names. One is a name we've talked about all day, Brian Mercurio, because he's in 6th. I basically should shut up about talking with him because every time I talk about him, there's always an issue with the commentator's curse. But remember the guy that started shotgun on this field, Michael Frisch, P41? The man from Florida is in 8th and getting close to Chase Alvey for the 7th position. What a run for the 58 team.
Yeah, you talk about drivers trying to work their way through. It was a rough and tough open qualifying session. So maybe that's why, some of the drivers didn't get as good of a queue effort, and in Frisch's case, did not queue up at all. That is a remarkable plus 34. By far and large, your biggest mover. I think second best, Garrison Hogan started 40th and is up to P20. So the 58's been on a rail.
As we take the white flag here in Concord in Charlotte, Jake Nichols out in front by 3.5 seconds over defending Coca-Cola iRacing Series champion Zach Novak. These two proved us wrong, as we thought that Brian Mercurio was one of the fastest cars. Nichols aced that pit strategy, stayed out of the competition yellow, and blitzed the field, and Novak does not have a response as Nichols back out onto the oval.
And it comes down to that strategy, the decision to put himself at a spot where he obviously got that track position, headed to a restart late in this race, and then it was the speed at the end you mentioned, going toe-to-toe with the naughty Zach Novak, a regular foe for him on Tuesday nights, and he's going to go up onto the bank in NASCAR 3 and 4 for the final time on a night in which we raise awareness for the Black Lives Matter movement and honor the life of George Floyd. It is Jake Nichols who entertained us this evening from the Charlotte Motor Speedway Roval. He'll take the checkered flag and win the George Floyd 100.
As Novak will come home in second spot. Kenny Brady got very close to Novak, but he only gets to third. We'll take a look. Alan Bowes did not pit and comes home in fourth. Fifth place, let me see. Looks like Austin Johnson, in the 21, and Brian Mercurio in sixth. Frisch managed to get to P7, up from last, 41st in this field.
We're going to do our best to get your top 3 finishers on the radio in just a moment. The rest of your top 10, Chase Alvey, Santiago Tires, who had that contact with Mercurio in the second half of this race, and Evan Rice to round out the top 10 cars in the field here this evening. It is a long trip around for Jake Nichols, but it called Alan Bowes, who, by the way, Josh, is out of fuel now on the infield portion, but he did manage to make that race car go the distance. He, Chase Alvey, I believe the only 2 drivers, in addition, I think, to Eric Pruitt. So 3 cars total, I count, that were able to make that fuel last that entire run to the end.
Luckily, even in the real world, I don't think NASCAR requires a fuel sample. Of course, in the virtual world, they don't. If this was F1, Alan Bowes would probably be DQ'd, as there's no fuel left in that car. As I think Garrison Hogan is going to give the 21 a bump and try and get back to the pit lane. A lot like, of course, this is completely niche to mention, but Tristan Hagenstein did this to me in a NASA Rallycross race many years ago, getting me back, in fact, at Charlotte. So I guess Charlotte's just the track where you just have this good sportsmanship.
These drivers, one big community, and of course we talk about the Charlotte Motor Speedway, and you wonder maybe why we chose to run the Roval. Not only is it fun, but Down the road in Fayetteville, North Carolina, was where George Floyd was born back in 1973. So the track choice and choosing a North Carolina virtual track, that was influence as well. And this is, you can see Nichols is celebrating on the front straightaway. And the rest of your top three there as well, as we're going to be talking with him, Novak, Brady, in just a few moments. Want to remind you again, we encourage you to stick around post-race here for these drivers, but if you're stepping away, to donate, if you can, to either the Floyd Memorial Fund at gofundme.org/F/George Floyd, or the NAACP Legal Defense Fund at NAACPLDF.org. All of those many options. There's so many different social justice causes that you can donate to. Pick one in your local town. Help make a difference in your community, and thank you for being a part of this one. As I thought we got a great show. I've said it right off at the top. Fan of the Roval, Josh. Not that I'm any good at it, but I think it's fun. And I think we saw a great night of racing, top to bottom, for the last 3-4 hours. When you look back to the start of the Q sessions with everybody who was a part of this.
As I've always thought that big, bulky stock cars turning right on a road course produces a fantastic show. Two quick things that I want to mention. I don't think we're going to get an interview with Kenny Brady, our third place finisher, as he does not have a mic for car number 10. And also, while Nichols still celebrates, we'll take a look at the results still. 11th through 20th, Jake Poulin, Mike Rasimus, Blake Sasser, Jacob Fisher, Ethan Smith, Ray Alfala, Daniel Silvestri in 17th, 18th, Garrison Hogan, 19th, Liam Brotherton, and 20th is the 20 car of Justin Buthleho.
We saw an early pit stop, kind of way back when, for Patello to kind of cycle things out strategy-wise in this one. And also you have Nick Olson, Sean Butler, Austin Drake, Nick DeGroot, Brandon Hoff as the 25 cars who finished this one on the lead lap. And, of course, I think everybody through P34 still in the race. But certainly a lot of big names finished out of it. The likes of Overland, Schildhaus, Strauss, and War. Dylan Alt back there also unable to go the distance in this one. And maybe now Jake Nichols, your race winner. I see his radio is queued up. We'll see if we can chat with the driver of the number 35 machine. Jake, you got us on radio?
Yes, I do.
I'll tell you what, congratulations on a race win. As one of the best on this iRacing service, no stranger to going up against some of the best competition on the sim, and I think to do it tonight for such a great cause maybe makes this one mean that much more. Congratulations.
Thanks, man. That was a crazy one. Man, it was so fun. The Roval was so intense. Like, one little mistake, and I'm really glad they chose this, because one little mistake and you're just falling back. You wear your stuff too much, so it definitely made it interesting. I don't know if wrecking the car on lap 1 and having to pass the whole field was smart on my end, but man, it made it very fun for me. It was lots of fun racing with some of the best out there. Really a lot of great talent in this race. It was over 100 entries, so obviously you're going to have an amazing group of drivers and people. I can't thank everyone involved enough for putting this race on, and there's so much more than just winning the race behind the scenes to this race, and it's only part of it, and I'm honored to win it and honored to just compete in it, and I can't thank everyone enough, especially with how it ended up tonight and how the race went up and then down and then back up again to victory lane. So just a lot of emotions going on.
Yeah, of course, there's a lot of your eNASCAR, Coca-Cola iRacing Series counterparts in this race, and maybe a good run here tonight could be a sign of things to come, maybe for later on this year on Tuesday nights. But obviously, could be using this time with a break in the schedule to kind of take some off. What compelled you to compete and participate in this event?
Just staying up to date with things, especially looking for the Coke Series. We do go to the Roval later in the year, and we're right there with the playoffs. We're the last spot in the playoffs right now, so this track may be very important for me later in the year, so that helped, and just everything involved in this race. There's more to just the race, as I said already, and it was a great show. it's interesting because I made a bet with some of my buddies that I donate $1 per car I passed on track. I didn't anticipate going to the back on lap 1 and having to pass the whole field, so it's going to be interesting. We'll have to tally that up. I'll get some of my friends to help me out on that, but it's such for a great cause here, and I'm so glad to just get some race time. Obviously, with this month break in the Coke Series, it's nice to still be on the track and keep up to date with yourself, and to race guys like Zach Novak there. I wish he didn't get damaged. I think we would have put on a really good show, but either way, it was very tough, very hard fought. Our strat paid off with staying out of the competition yellow, but overall, it was a great night for us.
And I think as well, money going to be going to good places, not just out of your pocket, as you noted, but I think as well that we have somebody that's going to be making a donation on your behalf in your name to a justice reform organization of your choice. And as well, I think some swag and merch as well going your way, courtesy of the Raceway to this one. Jake, we appreciate you taking the time out of your week to participate in this race and as well for chatting with us after that hard-fought victory. Good to chat with you. Congratulations.
Thank you.
The race winner tonight from Charlotte to end the George Floyd 100, and the driver that was so close to getting that win, Zach Novak, the second hand of that battle. Josh, you're chatting with the 90.
Mr. Zach Novak, I don't follow the Coca-Cola series as much as I should, but I have to ask, what was going through your head when you ran it wide in the chicane?
I pretty much knew the race was over right there because I had to get through those lap cars a lot better than Jake did, and I pretty much did that. I had like the perfect scenario that I needed, and I just overshot it a little bit, and then I think I got a bunch of rear end damage from that. I'm not really sure if it was from that or if it was from something prior, but I was like 10 miles an hour slower than he was on the oval, so that definitely didn't help, but still, really fun race, really glad to be a part of it, and winning is definitely not, the main reason to participate in this race.
I absolutely have to agree there. That kind of confirms what Evan and I were talking about as when you ran it wide, got that damage, we thought you were slower. Take me through how the car, before that, like the focus of not making any mistakes and trying to keep it on the road. How difficult is this Cup car at the Charlotte Roval?
Yeah, it's always been extremely difficult, but this setup specifically was really tough to get in the corners. You were braking before the 5 going into the backstretch chicane, so you had to really back it up, and then it was tough to get grip going down the straightaways, so I just tried to be as smooth with it as possible. I really didn't do too great of a job at that, but I did the best I could without trying to give up too much time, and tires just definitely were a bit more important there.
As Evan, you got anything for our second place man?
I just got to say, we were talking with Jake at the very top of the mountain there, Zach, in that battle, of course. Tonight may be a preview of Coke Series things to come. I know obviously cars handling different with the setup that you guys were working on, but did you learn anything tonight that you can kind of move forward?
Well, I actually haven't driven this tire model on a road course yet, so my first laps on it were in the qualifying session tonight, so that'll help me a lot, just kind of understanding it a little bit more and getting some laps on it, because Watkins Glen's coming up here pretty soon for the Coke Series, so definitely going to have to start preparing for that. Need to start climbing in the points a little bit, so this will help for sure.
As it looks like, as thanks for chatting with us, Zach. Good run for a second. It looks like we've got Brian Mercurio keyed up on our radio channel, so I think we're going to have a chat with him as well. We'll have to see. As Brian Mercurio, I would normally love to speak to you in Victory Lane, but what's called the internet kind of hurt you there. We were all rooting for you. We thought you were the fastest car. I cursed you again, because if you remember Solstice a couple months ago, what happened in the chicane there?
So I knew that's going to be one of the only opportunities I was going to be able to get around Santiago. I knew some of those guys had the older tires because of the strategy they did. So I knew, that was a good chance to start getting around him. And I feel like I gave him plenty of room there. And looking back on the replay, I see at least half a lane. I know I was up on the curb, and no fault against Santiago. He pinched me pretty hard while I was on the curb. Totally understandable, but there was room, and internet seemed to do its internet things, and took us out, unfortunately.
As up until that point, how was the car feeling? I mean, you were stupid fast compared to the rest of the field. We thought that you were going to check out. I mean, how we were asking Zach how the car worked around this track. Is it hard to focus? Is it hard to get that laser focus and drive, or are you just in your own comfort zone?
I kind of like to be the person who's just in the driver's seat and just kind of check out. I think one of the hardest things is getting yourself into a rhythm. And once you break out of it, unless you can get back in it, you're kind of going to be, you're not going to be yourself. You're not going to be running fast laps. So as soon as I got in the lead in the first half of the race there, and I can kind of just get in my own groove and stay consistent, I felt really good after the first half, and then once I saw what Santiago and Jake did with their strategy, knowing I had to get around him, I had an idea of what I wanted to do. I mean, I guess one could argue that there was plenty more time left in the second half of the race. I made my move with, I think it was about 16 to go, so there was still plenty of time. I could have tried to get around him, but I saw an opportunity. I went for it, and I think everyone thinks it might have been clean, and it should have been clean, but things went a different way.
As Evan, you got anything for Mr. Mercurio here?
I just got to ask, the way that this race started, Brian, to obviously not be able to end up in victory lane is got to hurt a little bit, of course, knowing that you had the speed. But I've asked it to all the drivers that we chatted with and just kind of wanted your thoughts on being able to participate in an event like this.
It's pretty special. Knowing a lot of the guys who are working behind the scenes. I'm teammates with Raja and Garrett. Garrett working race control, and Raja who was helping organize everything. And shout out to everybody else who was able to put this on tonight. You guys over here at STN and Monon and everybody who coordinated everything, got the other sessions up, and got everybody locked in. So it was pretty special. I feel like I still put on a great show. Obviously, I would have loved to be able to win. And even if there was one more lap, there was a very good chance I could have cracked in the top 5, which I think coming back from, I think it was 21st or 22nd, all the way up almost into the top 5 is pretty special. But, yeah, like I said, winning is one thing, but at least being able to participate in an event like this is something special. And I really appreciate everybody who put this on.
As I think, Evan, thank you, Brian. I think that is something that we can go throughout the field and think about, because all these drivers don't care if they won, don't care if they finished second. They're thankful that they were here and they could race for the cause.
Yeah, winning is kind of a bonus. Everybody wants to win. But this is not a race in which you needed to win. This is a race I think that many of them felt like they needed to compete in. And like I said off at the top, if it is for a personal connection to the cause, if it's simply just using their platform, to spread the message of us seeking positive change, that is kind of the main reason why all the drivers in the field tuned in and raced. And that's why everybody at home, I should say, as well, tuned in and joined us. And that's as well why I said yes right away when I was, asked about this event and would 100% like to be a part of it. And again, at the end of the day, it is both about the donations and, of course, raising the money because, those funds are needed to be able to put forth action, with all the various different organizations that we've mentioned. But as well, I think it is just being supportive and being able to amplify this message. And I think that is the one thing that's true. Drivers, us, viewers, and kind of everybody across the board alike.
As we wind down our coverage here on STN Racing of the George Floyd 100. I'd really like to cap off this show. Of course, we've talked to the drivers involved. We know why this race is a thing. Unfortunately, it happened. But the awareness that has been raised, the humbleness, if that's even a word, of the drivers. I mean, everyone is thankful and grateful that they could be here, myself included. And really, the racing on track, really, it was honestly a very good event. We saw some pit strategy, we saw some passing, we saw some bumping and banging. Evan, I have to think this event, of course, obviously, given the circumstances, it was a success.
100%. I think that, we mentioned it earlier as well, that we've seen many charity events on iRacing, annual things. A lot of leagues do charity events and just kind of to raise money and charity streams. But tonight, a different event. I think a first for the sim racing community. And I hope as well that, not the last. I hope that we can use our voices in this community to do good things and to amplify positive messages. And we've talked about this, kind of throughout the fact that, tonight's race is bigger than just a sim race. And we're happy that everybody has been a part of it with us here tonight for the virtual Charlotte Motor Speedway. So again, all the people that had a hand in this, not exclusively, but of course, Promoted Rahman, Raja Karuth, Brad Perez, everybody else behind the scenes, to the folks here, helping out with the broadcast and inviting me to be a part of it, the STN Racing team and Zach Johnson, our producer downstairs. To get involved. Again, tonight we were benefiting the Floyd Memorial Fund. You can donate if you're able. We encourage you to at gofundme.org/F/George Floyd. You can also donate to the NAACP Legal Defense Fund at NAACPLDF.org. But just be involved. You can go to blacklivesmatter.carrd.co, and I think that's a great resource with more information on how you can get involved. And as the younger generation, if you kind of fit into that category, which is, kind of what our sim racing community is, but even maybe for the elder statesmen as well of our community to use your voice to inspire positive change. And I hope that at the end of the day tonight, that is what we have done here from the virtual Charlotte Motor Speedway. So that's it for us for the George Floyd 100. As I mentioned, for Zach Johnson downstairs, for Josh Burtz alongside myself, Evan Pasoko, in the broadcast booth. We appreciate you tuning in with us here this evening. We would rather not have to do events like this. It has been great to see the community get behind this. Use the hashtag, the George Floyd 100, hashtag say their names, hashtag justice for Floyd, hashtag Black Lives Matter. And there are so many different causes. And that's it for us here tonight for the Charlotte Motor Speedway. Until next time, good night.